So welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started, although I know we'll have some coming in here as we go. My name is Brad Cooper. I'm with Free Wheelchair Mission. We're just so excited to have you all with us today. A very exciting Wheelhouse, as you can see here. It's up here, whatever. Our Wheelhouse webinar series. It's just been a great pleasure and honor and blessing to share some stories with you of the work that's being done around the world to bring mobility to those in need and the transforming stories that mobility creates. And so today we're excited to share a story and stories from one of our partners in Uganda. And I'll have him and also my partner in crime here, Vanessa, our partner on the webinar as well. And so now I'm going to go ahead and add. Here we go. There we bring our panelists in here, and going ahead and have our panelists introduce themselves. Over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you everyone for joining us. We are so excited to share with you about our friend here, Francis. So I'm Vanessa. I am the Director of Programs, and I work very closely with our partners, and you'll hear a little bit from me in a bit about how we do that. So thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to be sharing with you today, and I'm going to pass it on over to you, Francis.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning and good evening. I don't know whether there's any good afternoons as well. My name is Francis Mugwanya. I live in Uganda. I'm married to Adrian Mugwanya. We have 3 children, and we are Free Wheelchair Mission partners here in Uganda.
All right. Thank you so much, Vanessa and Francis. And yeah, it's late night there, or getting late night there, I guess, in Uganda. Almost literally from here in California anyway, about halfway around the world. So, just so grateful to have you join us a little bit later than the day your time. So thanks so much. And thanks, Vanessa. So going to get it started here in a minute, but I would like to start off by playing, just because it's such a great story and gives us some really nice visuals and invites one of our recipients on to talk as well. I'm going to share a video here, hopefully technology willing, of some of the one of the exciting stories of transformation that's happened in Uganda.
Amazina gange nditibwa Uganda Moses. Ndine emyaka 18. Nga family yaife tinengeiga tuli bavu. Nze ebirwa byenabyo bingi. Nze ndowooza nti zena nenda mbe kukuku mu mbeera yesimisa. Mama yanzaala kendi mulamu. Wenzali bakende mulamu n'abawo ku emyaka gitya 2. Wabula omutuda gwangema mu katono n'asuuwa omubi empiso we yaluda bagyetwala bansala. Bwe bansala nze nga tisobola kutyama, tisobola kukola kyo kyonna, kensiba nsigalawo kenkola ki kenamba ebulambalaawo. Kusomozebwa kwendaganya bingi.
People think people with disabilities are second class, they're cursed or bewitched. And because of those misconceptions, most of the people with disabilities are marginalized or left out. Someone with a disability is just a person. We need to realize that they have abilities and capabilities.
So mulango esobola bakubira mbakoba balekere tusamu naiso tuna tuli bantu ngabo.
People with disabilities do not have access to mobility or cannot afford mobility. Without mobility, there's very little that people can do. When you receive a wheelchair, it just changes everything. It gives them a new identity. You no longer have to drag yourself in the dirt or the mud. You have the opportunity to be clean and be presentable. So you're basically free. What they need is opportunities for them to be able to explore what is available to them and what's out there for them, and also what is in them. And that's what transformation is all about.
But wana kibe ekyokubona ku nti wozaala omulema oba tozaire kiki kintu kityo yena muntu ng'abantu abalamu.
The abilities and gifts are there. What we need is to open up our hearts and minds to give them the opportunities.
Just amazing and powerful video there. And thanks to Francis and Moses for showing us a little bit of what's happening there in Uganda. It's just a very powerful story. And we'll be sharing a little bit more about Moses' story a little bit later on. But first, before we do that, one of the things that many of you know about Free Wheelchair Mission, and some may not, is that we work with partners like Father's Heart Mobility Ministry in Uganda with Francis and many other partners around the world. And it's just a very unique model that we have for us that many others don't. And it allows us to reach many other parts of the world. So I'm going to have Vanessa just give a little bit of an overview of how we work with partners.
Thank you, Brad. So yes, Free Wheelchair Mission, we work through distribution partners. Part of the reason we are able to have the wide reach and scale that we have, right? We have served in over 94 countries. It is not because we have offices, right, in each and every one of those countries. It is because we work through partner organizations, what we term distribution partners. Free Wheelchair Mission, our only office is here in Irvine, California, actually. So Brad, if you can switch to the next slide. The way that this is structured with our partners, it's not a donor-donee type of relationship. Yes, Free Wheelchair Mission, we donate to our partners the wheelchairs and the ocean freight, right? But our partners have their own costs and responsibilities, which I believe Francis will be able to share with you a bit later. So our partners, they are responsible for the cost of importation, as well as the cost of the distribution of the wheelchairs and the cost of managing the program that goes along with that. When we decide that we're going to work with an organization, they go through a full vetting process, right? We vet them to make sure they're a legitimate organization. We check their references. Can they import? Can they manage a program of this size and scale? Those are all the sorts of questions we ask ourselves. We also ask if they're in it for the long haul. Are they going to be a long-term partner? We're not going to necessarily go through the cost of shipping them the wheelchairs, training them, and all the onboarding, all of that work and resourcing we do so that they can only receive one container of wheelchairs. We need to make sure that they're in it to partner with us long-term. Another important aspect of partnership is that it is a relationship. We cultivate relationships with them. It's not transactional where they touch base with us when they need something or we touch base when we need something. We know these partners as individuals and they know us as individuals. And one last thing I wanted to highlight about how we operate, in addition to training these organizations, we do audit them for compliance, right? So we do want to ensure that they are maintaining our standards, that the provision is appropriate, that the wheelchairs are being provided for free. So that's all part and parcel of how we, work and vet and set up these relationships and partnerships. And here you'll see in this slide some examples of the organizations we work with. So we work with large multinationals like Food for the Poor and World Vision, but we also work with smaller national organizations, like Father's Heart, which is in Uganda, and some others that you may have heard from in other Wheelhouse webinars. Not only do we rely on these partners to get the wheelchairs out there, to distribute them to the end user, but we also rely on them very heavily to provide us with the marketing content that Brad and his team need for videos and photos and stories, so that then we can turn around and share with you, our donors, the impact of what we've been able to build together. Brad, if you can go on to the last slide for me. So currently we have about 53 active partners. It ebbs and flows. But what I really wanted to highlight for you with this visual is how many of these partnerships are structured. So while we may have 53 active partners, distribution partners, below that are hundreds upon hundreds of sub-distribution partners. So Father's Heart is actually not structured this way, but many of our partners, in order for us to get out those thousands upon thousands of wheelchairs, they are structured this way. So we manage the distribution partner, and then they in turn will manage their network of partners. And it is their responsibility, the partner's responsibility, to ensure compliance, right? To ensure that these partners are doing a good job. So if we should find out, for example, that the wheelchairs are being assembled incorrectly, they're not being fitted correctly, or maybe even someone is selling wheelchairs, it is the partner that we go to and that we hold accountable and expects to rectify the situation. Free Wheelchair Mission doesn't go down to each and every one of these hundreds of sub-partners and manage that. So that in a nutshell is our program and how we're able to manage at the scale that we do. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have during the Q&A. Yeah, that is our partnerships. Brad?
All right, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Vanessa. And yeah, the great work that Vanessa and her team do in working with our partners, our many partners around the world, and enabling them, and especially during COVID and these very challenging times with shipping problems and just the issues in delivering wheelchairs and all of that. So it's just a really great blessing to have Vanessa and her team working with our partners and the network that we have and that they've been able to build up to get these wheelchairs out to so many in need. And so we want to shift gears and start talking about Francis and his work and the work that he does in Uganda. Before we do that, we have a couple of poll questions. So if you're on the Zoom there, you should be able to you should be able to participate in our poll questions. And I'm going to go ahead and launch the first poll question. The question is, what is the national bird of Uganda? And you've just got a few seconds here. Don't look it up on Google. Go ahead and what do you think the national bird is for Uganda? I'm just give it a couple more seconds. If you can go ahead and get your vote in there before I close the poll here. All right, we got some interesting answers coming in. Go ahead and give it a shot. National bird of Uganda. All right, I think we closed it there. So I'm going to go ahead and share the results. So it looks like the majority of you chose the crested crane. And that is the correct answer. It's a beautiful bird. I think it's a gray-crowned crane, and I guess the crested crane is like a subspecies of the crested crane, but a beautiful bird. It is I believe it's on the Ugandan flag, Francis, I believe, along with the Ugandan cob, which was the other one of the other options. On the it's kind of their emblem there with the Ugandan cob and the crested crane, and the African civet and green-winged teal are also animals, I believe, in Uganda as well. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing there. Great job, everyone. Some good you got the answer right there. So all right, so a little bit more about Uganda and the work that they do there. Vanessa, over to you.
So Francis, would you share with our attendees a little bit about Uganda? What can you tell us about the country, which you're from and in which you work?
Thank you so much. Uganda is a beautiful country indeed. And the people there are very personable, very happy, almost always. Any Ugandan you ever find anywhere will be so welcoming. Uganda is found in the eastern part of Africa, and it's roughly the size of Oregon in the United States. Right now, it's estimated that Uganda's population is about 40 million. And we have about 56 tribes, which share about 43 languages. So there's 43 different languages in Uganda. They're breaking down a little bit. Maybe I'll just highlight one thing about the population is Uganda is, if not the youngest, it's one of the youngest population in the whole world, where about 77% of the population is under the age of 25. So it's quite a young population there. I think that's roughly what I wanted to highlight. Those who want to know who the president is, we have President Museveni is our president.
All right. Thanks, Francis. And shifting gears a little bit more about you and your story, and the founder of the work of the ministry that you've been working in there for I don't know, it's been 13 years. How many years now?
We started on and off here in year 2000, but
2000. Oh, okay, almost 22 years then. Okay.
Yeah, but we rolled it officially and big scale in 2011 there.
Okay.
Roundabout. But okay. We started working with Free Wheelchair Mission back in 2007.
That's great. I know it's that obviously the work that you do is very unique and special to your heart. If you wouldn't mind sharing your story.
Yes. As Brad said, the work that we do here is part of my story. And I got polio when I was 3 years old, about 3.5, and that affected both of my legs. And wheelchairs at the time were very hard to come by. And my parents bought a big bicycle where my brother learned how to ride the bicycle through the frame because it was too small to sit on the big seat. So they would put me on the back of a big bicycle and then he will try to ride me to school. Now there's a big hill from our house back at my parents'. And every time he tried to step off of the bike because he couldn't climb the hill with me, we would fall. So we fell so many times. But once we got to school, he would drop me off and I'd have to crawl on my hands and knees to get around. And it was really hard for me for those 4 years that I was in school. My parents tried to get a wheelchair and they couldn't get one. They paid for one in one of the wheelchair workshops here in Kampala, but the workshop ate the money, but they did not give us the wheelchair. And so all of my hands and my knees were calloused. And I used to play football. We call it football here. In the States, you call it soccer. But I used to play the position of goalkeeper. So my hands were hard enough and knees were hard enough to play soccer with my friends. But part of my struggles growing up was the words that other people said, the neighbors said about me. Things like you're second class, you will never be able to go to school, you'll be useless, you will never be able to work. And as I grew up, when I mentioned getting married, they were like, you'll never get married, you'll never have children. So the words that people said got to me and I started believing what they said. But after 4 years of being in school without a wheelchair, a lady who runs an organization here called USDC, it's the Uganda Society for Children with Disabilities, gave me a wheelchair and it was for free. So at last I had a wheelchair. I was independent. I was able to go to school when I wanted to, go to church when I wanted to, go to visit my family when I wanted to. And that also gave my older brother, Fred, a break because he did a lot of work taking me back and forth from school because he had to pick me up as well. But being the oldest, Fred had to fetch water after picking me up from school. So when I got my wheelchair, that gave me a lot of freedom and independence. And that didn't alone create, happiness at first, because I still remembered the things that people told me until I met a friend of mine. His name is Dave Carroll, and he began to teach me what the Bible said about me. And that helped me a lot because it began to build me up and build my esteem. The person who other people had said is going to be useless. I realized that God loves me. I am a child of God, and he has a good plan for me, and he created me for a purpose. And when I began to believe what the Bible said, that began to change my life. So the turning point was getting a wheelchair and getting to know who I am, not what people said, but what God created me to be. And so when I got my wheelchair, I promised God that when I grow up, I'll give somebody a wheelchair. And so when I grew up, I started saving up a little bit of money. And I used to get about about $30 a month when I started working back in 2000. And I would save money until I had enough to buy a wheelchair for someone. And I bought about a dozen wheelchairs. The need was so overwhelming. I began looking out for who do I partner with, or who do I work with to meet the need that is here in Uganda. And so we started looking out for partners. And my pastor here in Uganda was the very first one to meet the board chair of Free Wheelchair Mission back then in 2007, and also met Dawn. And he told them about my passion to give others a wheelchair, and also to be able to see other people come to, the place where I am, where they realize their potential. They are able to be independent. They're able to have the freedom to go places. And so that's why we started the ministry, to be able to help other people, at least to the least be like me. But my prayer is that they'll be much better than me.
That'll be hard, Francis, for anyone to be better than you, my friend. Francis, I always love hearing the story of your story, and also how Father's Heart came to be. Would you share with our, the participants, how Father's Heart works with Free Wheelchair Mission? What it looks like for you to provide mobility using the wheelchairs that we provide?
Yes, maybe I'll just back up a little bit and share with you what the need is here. It's estimated that about 1 million Ugandans need a wheelchair, and only about 5% of that population can afford a wheelchair. And therefore, most of those can't be able to go to school. They cannot go to school. They cannot go to work because they cannot afford the wheelchair. And of course, wheelchairs are very hard to come by here in Uganda. So we import and distribute wheelchairs, and our partner Free Wheelchair Mission, as Vanessa mentioned earlier, they purchase the wheelchairs and send them over here to us. And we take care of part of the shipping cost and the distribution costs here in Uganda. And we, Father's Heart is set up in such a way that we do small distributions of wheelchairs where we fit people close to our office here in Kampala. And that's for the surrounding districts. We've done major distributions around us, but the ongoing maintenance and distribution around us is done back here in Kampala near our office. Our church runs a medical facility here, and that's where we do all the wheelchair work. But we set up to go out to a new district of Uganda that we've never gone to. And now we have about 140 districts. So we go to a new district every month, except for during the lockdowns caused by COVID, when we didn't go out much. But typically we are out for 1 week every month in a new district, distributing between 150 to 200 wheelchairs. So it's about 200 chairs every month that we distribute to people in Uganda in those districts. And then we report back to Free Wheelchair Mission at the end of the distributions there.
And you mentioned a little bit about, COVID and its impact recently. Would you share as well what the impact has been, like what the impact was last year, and then where it's kind of impacting you now?
Yes. Just a joke in there that many people call COVID COVID-19, but I think we've had many COVIDs. So we had COVID-19, COVID-20, COVID-21, and COVID-22. So, but in COVID-19, that was the very beginning of all of it. For us here, it didn't hit until March 2020. And when they announced COVID here and announced the very first lockdown, at first we thought everyone was going to die in just a matter of months. So nobody knew what had hit us. So we stopped everything to kind of observe what was happening. But it was also a rainy season here in March. So many of the surroundings, especially the suburbs of Kampala, were flooded from Lake Victoria. So there were floods here as well. So what we did is we paused all wheelchair distributions to try to keep people alive. We believe that, you know, if someone is alive, then they will need a wheelchair later. You don't give a wheelchair to dead people. So what we resorted to is we focused all of our finances to buying people food. People here live hand to mouth. And so if you don't work that day, you do not eat. And half of our population here, it's estimated that they live on $1 a day. And so it was hard for people to survive. So we turned into a food and basic need humanitarian organization. And we fed, as Father's Heart, we fed about 7,500 people in the surroundings here. And as things have been opening up, you know, once in a while, we learned how to gradually help a few people at a time, because there were so many restrictions on how many people you could gather. So we did, you know, 20 people here and 20 people there. But as things have been resuming to, you know, to open up again, whatever opportunity we find that things are open to gather up to 100 to 200 people, we just rush and, you know, hit the field and hit the road and serve as many people as possible. Now, our goal usually is to serve 2,000 people a year. And for 2021, I would say 2020, we did 1,066 people, about half of what we wanted to. And then 2021, we've served 1,380 people. So a little more than we did in 2020. But that affected us. So we only served half because of COVID. And of course, whenever we resume distributions, the prices for transport are usually high for people to come to the nearest place where we are. We go to their districts, but still, even if it requires $1 or $2 for a family to bring their person to get a wheelchair, that's already, you know, 2 days' wage to come to us and to go back. And so that's very expensive for them to come. So COVID has contributed to increased transport fares, and of course, poverty levels have also slammed back to low, where people haven't been able to work. The economy here in Uganda has greatly been affected. So it's really, really bad. And livelihood of people affected. Of course, the levels of corruption, even in the midst of the need, have also gone up. And in my church here, we've also seen many people who come to us, especially the mothers, and the fathers have abandoned their families because they cannot feed their families because of COVID. Many are out of work. And so it's been also close to about 2 years that our children haven't gone to school. So it's been hard, but we've tried to keep our heads up. Whenever there's an opportunity to hit the road, we get back there. And we need more bigger spaces now to serve people. So if we're going to serve 200 people, we need a bigger space to seat those people because of social distance and all the other standard operating procedures. So it has affected us that the people that come to us are fewer, not because the need is not there, but you get calls, oh, we couldn't afford the transport to come to you, or there's no way we can come. And so we've served half of the people that need the wheelchairs in the last 2 years as well.
Wow, Francis, just thanks so much for all of that update on where you're at with this terrible pandemic. And yeah, it's something we hear from partners around the world that everyone is experiencing right now in certain ways. Obviously, we have impacts here in the United States as well, but the shipping crisis and just the difficulty in getting those wheelchairs out. But in spite of all of that, you're still providing mobility. You're still getting those wheelchairs to those who need them, maybe in less numbers, maybe you have to spend a little bit more time and training and getting them set up and making sure that it's done safely during COVID. But that's it's just a blessing, to hear from you and to hear that you're still moving forward in this mission that we share together. I am going to go ahead and remind everyone about the Q&A button down there at the bottom somewhere, wherever it is on your Zoom screen. Please be sure to put your questions in for Francis or for Free Wheelchair Mission, and we'll get to those in a bit. And also just a reminder that the sessions are being recorded, and so after the session is over, we will send out a link in the next day or two, and we would really appreciate it if you shared on social media the session. And so now, Francis, we have many stories, and you just mentioned that you've had thousands stories around the world. Actually, sorry, before we do that, I have another poll question. I'm looking at my agenda here, so I know I'm going to launch the other poll question before we get to the next one. Okay, so how many wheelchairs do you think Free Wheelchair Mission has distributed through Father's Heart Mobility Ministry in Uganda? So how many wheelchairs? Francis just gave some idea of how many he distributes per year. So, and obviously he has other wheelchairs too, but maybe you can do the math there and how long he's been just doing it. And you can, for your mathematicians out there, could do the calculation. All right, I'll just give it another second or two. Go ahead and put your guesses in there. Well, for on the low end there, I thought I heard him say 2,000 a year, and they've been around for quite a while. So the 2435, I'm not so sure about. All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And it looks like 58% of you got the correct results, which are 11,915 since 2007, since Francis and his team have been partnering with Free Wheelchair Mission there in Uganda. And so great job for the 58% of the people who got that right on the webinar here. Okay, sorry, now I wanted to talk a little bit more about some specific stories. And so at the top of our webinar here, we shared the story of Moses and an amazing transformation that took place there, Francis. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll share some additional photos here on the screen here in a minute of Moses. But tell us a little bit about that story. Why is that story maybe special to you and Father's Heart?
Yeah, Moses got his wheelchair in 2017, and he told us that it was his very first wheelchair. Moses is 29 now, and when he received his wheelchair, as you had him share his story, he wanted to live a good life. He never wanted people to look down on him and despise him and call him useless. He was born without a disability, as he shared. And when he was about 2 years old, he got a fever, and they believe it was malaria that caused the disability that he has. It's most likely that he got polio, because the symptoms are usually the same as malaria. But his legs got paralyzed, so he crawls on his hands and knees. And he crawled on his hands and knees for about 23 years because he couldn't afford a wheelchair. He lives back in the eastern part of Uganda. And when he heard that we were coming into his area to get a chair, his family gathered some money for him, and they brought him over to where we were. And at that time, he wasn't able to work because he couldn't go anywhere. And so he got the money for transport from his parents. And after getting a wheelchair, he also got us small gifts from one of our staff members. And so he got to move around his community, and he quickly realized that he could do something that was buying and selling produce. So there's corn here, we call it maize. So when the maize is in season, when it dries, people sell that grain. And when they do, wholesale buyers buy it and resell it. So he realized with his little gift that he could buy and sell maize, which he did for a couple of years. And he got some money to start a small little merchandise store. So he got, a few matchboxes here and sweets or candy and little buns of bread, and a few basic needs that his village needed. And he opened up a little store. So now he runs that. He was so proud that every stage he calls to let me know that he now, has moved the next step. So on top of the little store, he called me, I think it was last month, and he said, now I have added this, what we call mobile money here, where if you need to send money to your friend, you don't need to go to the bank, but you can go to a mobile money kiosk and send that money through mobile money. So you give your money to the kiosk, they send the transaction over the phone to your friend, and your friend withdraws the money on the other side without having to come to you. So it's the easy way of the normal person here in Uganda or common Ugandan to bank or do a transaction. So now on top of the little store selling little merchandise, he's able to add that kiosk, and he's now a small mobile money agent in his village. So he's very excited that the wheelchair has brought him out there to interact with people, but also enabled him to work, because now he can earn a living and he's able to support his family. He has his father and mother still alive, but they all are peasants. They go to the garden and grow some food to eat, but they don't have much more money beyond that. So he's able now to buy some little basic needs for his family as well. And as we can see in the picture, of course, interact with the whole neighborhood, because he's now able to be mobile. He doesn't have to crawl on his hands and knees anymore.
Thanks so much. And Vanessa, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story, Francis. There's so many amazing stories like that I'm sure that you have to tell. Would you share with the attendees a little bit about what it looks like to serve, in Uganda, especially so the more remote and rural areas? What are some of the challenges that are unique to you that you have to overcome in order to provide mobility in Uganda?
The very first one is transportation. Both our own transport to get to places, but also the people's transport to come to where we are. It's hard for people to get transport. So some use bicycles and some use little motorcycles, and some use little cars, and of course there's no roof racks on some of them, so they have to make sure that they use whatever is available to travel. Now for the motorcycles, usually they have to strap the wheelchair on the back and try to get the mother and the child to sit in between, right behind the wheelchair, and then whoever is driving the motorcycle seat may be close to the tank, and that's how they get them home. And sometimes they use bicycles. Sometimes the caretakers have to take the wheelchair first on the bicycle, and come back and pick up the recipient afterwards. And the other challenge is the road network. In some of the places that we go, both for us, but also especially for the wheelchair user. Now for us, it's usually slippery, and some of them are roads that you have to, use a four-wheel drive. In fact, we never drive to any place without four-wheel drive cars, because we always are unsure of the conditions we're going to find in that place. But for our wheelchair users, the hilly terrain in the mountainous or hilly areas here is usually full of rocks. And so it's hard for people to maneuver the ropes in that terrain to use the wheelchairs, and some of them are too steep for them to get around. So for some, the wheelchairs are mainly used at home, and they can't go out there unless they have two people helping to steer them, push them to go places. And of course, as I mentioned, some places in the homesteads don't have defined roads. So they have to find a way to, a passage for their wheelchairs to get around to visit different places. And for some, it's the dirt. So some roads accumulate a lot of dirt from either running water that it gathers, and it's really hard to wheel a wheelchair through dirt or dust. It's hard to get through that. So some of those challenges of transportation and road network, and the fact that there's no defined road for the wheelchair users, or rocky and hilly or mountainous terrain for some of our users getting around.
Thanks, Francis. And hopefully, that's why we have those nice, sturdy, mountain bike tires and wheels on the wheelchairs. And hopefully, your users, and you find that our wheelchairs, because they were designed, specifically for the environments you're talking about, that it enables your users to be able to get around in some of those places. Right. And it sounds like it's definitely a challenge, and something we maybe take for granted here in the United States and other countries where we've got the roads and we've got the paved walkways. And so just whether it's getting the wheelchairs there as you're describing to those who need them, and then the conditions in order to use the wheelchairs, that's just painting a great picture of it there. So thanks so much for that. In addition to the conditions that the users may experience, recipients around the world, could you tell us a little bit more about the needs, the specific needs? Why do so many in Uganda need wheelchairs? What are some of either the conditions or disabilities that might cause someone to need a wheelchair?
Right. In the past, for people that are, I'll say about 35 years or 30 years and older, the population with a disability 30 years and older, the cause of disability was largely polio and malaria for many of them. And so that was the major cause that, led to people needing wheelchairs. Now, the younger children, though, it's been a bit different. It's mainly malaria, and the healthcare system is also not the best. So you find children getting cerebral palsy because the hospital was too far and the baby wasn't quickly born at home, and so they're trying to find the nearest hospital, which might be about 15 miles from where they are, and the only thing they have at home is a bicycle. So by the time the expectant mother gets to the hospital, the baby has already been damaged, if they're not dead. So many of them have come out with those who have survived have suffered from cerebral palsy. And some of it is also caused by, the expectant mother suffering from malaria during pregnancy, or some of them not even attending any, we call it antenatal care. I think we call it prenatal care in North America. So some don't have access to that. And the other cause of disabilities is spina bifida. Several children have spina bifida here because of the nutrition. So, mothers not having access to, a balanced meal, or access to supplements, vitamins and folic acid and things like that, that have caused children to suffer from spina bifida and hydrocephalus as well. So we serve so many of the children that have suffered from that, and of course the older population that suffered from polio. And those are the main causes. So there's so many of them. And I think the government has been trying to find out how can we prevent, those causes of disability, to limit the numbers. Because right now it's estimated that about 12.4% of Ugandans have a disability, some form of a disability. Now that's about 5 million Ugandans who have some form of a disability. And of the 5 million, it's the 1 million that needs wheelchairs. I've also been told that another 1 million needs white canes because they are blind. So those are all the estimates we've been getting. So the need is huge. And of course, we don't have, the insurance or the government provisions like they have in some other countries, where the government comes in and gives the wheelchairs to the people. So we have to find ways to meet the needs, different ways, as different charities or non-government organizations. So that's the need here.
Well, thanks so much, Francis, for sharing that. And yeah, the need is great. And, we're partnering with you to help to try to solve this as much, whether it's dozens or hundreds or thousands, per year. You're helping to make a difference. And part of that, is, those users, those recipients, when they receive that wheelchair, maybe for the very first time, right. And what happens, to that person when they're now able to get around, where they maybe couldn't go to school, couldn't go to work, couldn't see family, and then they can. And so maybe talk a little bit about that. What it's like, for one of your wheelchair recipients to receive a wheelchair, and then what does it do potentially to the communities that you serve? Because you mentioned in terms of the stigma that maybe someone has living with a disability. What does it do to the person who receives it? How does that change their life, and maybe a little bit more? And what does that do to their family and community?
Right. We talked about this stigma where people are thinking you're second class, you're useless, they think you're unable to learn or do anything, and many of them think that you're second class, so you do not amount to the first class where most of them belong. But once you get a wheelchair, first of all, you're presentable, you're clean, and you're able to interact with people. When you're filthy and dirty, many people think that, the dirt here on top of the disability also affected your mind. So when you're clean and presentable, people are more likely to start interacting with you. And for many, they're able to go to school. And some, like Moses, is able to go to work. He missed the opportunity to go to school, but at least he can go to work. And the other thing that I found very useful is once you have a person with a disability out there in the community, not hidden away and not behind the houses, people begin asking questions. What happened to you? Are you able to do this? Are you able to do that? And the more they learn about you, the more that stigma goes away, because they begin to learn you can talk. One person came to me and said, "Oh, you have a watch." And a normal thing like that, but I'm out there, so they're able to see I have a watch and clean. And so the more questions they ask, the more the stigma is dealt with there. So people begin to ask those tough questions, they begin to get the answers, you begin to interact, and they begin to realize you're actually normal and you have potential. You can do certain things that many people thought that you were not able to do. And that's what I found. You get out there, people get assured you can do something, you're actually normal, your head works, and you're able to start making friends, you're able to work, you're able to go to school.
That's great. Thanks so much, Francis. It's amazing to hear what that can do for both the person receiving the wheelchair and for their families and communities. Do have a question from Ned, and I believe you mentioned that Moses was able to start a store. It's not like he was selling corn. I'm not sure what else he was selling, but the question was if you see farmers who are trying to grow food, with a disability. And so are they able to work from their wheelchairs, either to grow food or to manage, maybe farm animals or something like that? That's the next question.
Yes, we see many of them. The majority of them, especially because they didn't have an opportunity to go to school, farming is one quick way for them to make a little bit of money. They're of course not able to hold we call it a hoe that they use to till the land, but they get out of their chair, they get their wheelchair to the garden and get out, and then they're able to do the digging while sitting down. But many of them do farming, yeah. Not too big gardens because they don't have that big equipment, but they're able to grow food enough for themselves, their little family, and a little bit more to sell.
Great. Okay. And we have another question. How do you identify wheelchair recipients in advance of going to the remote regions that you mentioned? So, in order to even, I guess, kind of determine the need for a wheelchair and maybe more specifics about what size and fitting and things like that, I imagine you have to visit them first, or how do you, so the question is, how do you identify those needs, especially in those very remote areas that you serve?
Right. We work with churches. We work with districts. Every district has a system of leadership, and on that committee of leadership at the district, they have a community development officer, and they also have a representative for people with disabilities. And so those representatives for people with disabilities, the community development officers, and the churches work together to generate the list of those that need wheelchairs, especially for communities where we can't be able to go there first and come back and assess what we have after assessing the need. We rely on preliminary scrutiny from that team. And most of them, the community development officers, are trained enough. They're social workers. So they're trained enough to look at the person. And some of the districts also have a doctor who is the district health officer who helps them to identify what the individual might need. So the leadership at the districts, coupled up with the leaders of people with disabilities and the churches, they come up with that list and send it to us. And so they recommend also what sizes the individuals might need. And also other definitions like, so for example, Francis is 12 and he has cerebral palsy, he can't sit. So then we are able to estimate, well, a 12-year-old will be able to sit in, and if they have CP, they can't sit, they need a tilting space chair, they will need 12 to 13 inches wide of a chair. So you kind of use some experience to carry closest to what you would need. And of course they say, oh, so-and-so is 10 and they're able to sit, okay, they will need a small free wheelchair mission Gen 2 chair. They are 12 and they go to school, and then so okay, that one will need probably a medium Gen 3 free wheelchair mission chair. So that information helps us a lot for the remote areas. So we depend on the churches and the district leadership.
That's great. Thanks so much. Coming up on the end of our time here just shortly. Thanks for all those that had questions. And if you have some additional questions and we couldn't get to them today, feel free to email us, info@freewheelchairmission.org. And we'll go ahead and try to answer your questions there. And also, as I mentioned, this is recorded, and we will be sharing the link to the video recording after the session here, and we'll be sending that out. And we would appreciate if you could share it with your friends and family and coworkers, the great work that Francis is doing in Uganda, and also that Free Wheelchair Mission is doing around the world in providing that gift of mobility. And so we thank you so much, Francis. Anything coming up here in the next couple of weeks or so for you and your mission there in Uganda? Anything special or? coming up?
Yes, our hope is that the corona cases would have come down by the end of the month. And when they do, we will storm out there and we have a district that is coming up soon here in Western Uganda, waiting for 160 wheelchairs. So we'll be hitting the road to Western Uganda and delivering 160 wheelchairs. I think it's the second week of February.
That's great. That's great. 160 wheelchairs. The mission is continuing.
Great news, Francis.
Well, yes. Thanks so much, Francis. God bless you and the work that you're doing there. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. And we look forward to seeing you. We should have more information on the next Wheelhouse webinar that's going to be coming up here soon. So thanks, everyone, and for joining. Thank you all, and thank you for supporting Free Wheelchair Mission.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all, and God bless.
Bye.